we learned the Heilige Tanya, Sefer Tanya Kadisha for the Mountain Rebbe. And we're holding Peirik Vov, Rabbi say. We're holding Peirik Vov. Now, this is our fourth class. We've been sitting over here a little bit. What's happened is this. Peirik Vov is Klipper. Zel Yom Hazeh. Just like there's a Nefesh Elokis, there's a Nefesh Abamis. What has been the hesitation? What's taken so much time? What's taken so much time is that I tried to explain, understandably, to the best of my limited abilities, what it means, Zel Yom Hazeh also Lekim. So we broke it down into three. Just like when the Alter Rebbe discussed the Nefesh Elokis, he broke it down into three. Peirik Beis, Peirik Gimel, Peirik Daled. Peirik Beis speaks about the Neshama itself, the Etzem HaNeshama. Peirik Gimel speaks about the Koiches HaNefesh, the faculties of the Neshama. And Peirik Daled, the Rebbe discusses what's called Levusha HaNefesh, the garments of the Neshama. These three ideas, I guess you could call its connection to above, itself, and its connection to below. You haven't seen this. Roish, Toyos, Soif, everything has three parts. The inner part is a connection to the Yebishter. Your outer part is a connection to the world. And the central part, this is your form. This is your identity. This is your Mahus and your Metzias. So Peirik Beis discusses how the Neshama is a Chelik and a Kamimal. Mamish, Yisol, Olam, Machshava, Shtik, Yebishter. Peirik Gimel is what the Neshama's Tziur, or Metzias is. The form of the Neshama. Seichel Umidas. And when we learned Peirik Gimel, we spent forever on it. We also talked a little bit about the Chushim. Right, there's the faculties, Moyach, Leiv, mind, heart, and the five senses, Re'iyah, Shmiyah, Tarech, and Mishush. And then the outer part of the Neshama is the garments, thought, speech, and action, which is the Neshama's connection to the world outside of itself. So when we got the Peirik Vov, you have Zeh, Lu'uma Zeh. One is opposite the other. So we spent one class talking about the Etzem of the Nefesh HaBahamis, the essence of the animal soul, which is the opposite of the essence of the godly soul, however we explain it. The last two classes, we talked about the koiches, the tools of the godly soul versus the tools of the animal soul. On the one hand, they're exactly the same. You have sholish midas rois v'seichel ha'mididon, just like you had in Peirik Gimel, chapter 3. You have sholish oimes, v'sheva kfules, you have three chabad, three moichin, three chochma, bina, das, then you have 7 emotional attributes. It's a chesed, gevura, teferes, and so on. So the ummah, that's the same thing. But they're not the same. Because there's a subjectivity to the Nefesh HaBahamis. The Alter Rebbe's expression is the 7 bad mides and the moichin which give birth to them. But he puts it in that order. Because the Alter Rebbe is trying to communicate to us the idea that the way the Nefesh HaBahamis rationalizes things, the way the Nefesh HaBahamis uses its logic, is first it decides what the conclusion is. Then he figures out how he's going to make it worse. So it's krum, it's backwards. Yeah. So that's why it took so much time. Because I wanted to talk through each nekuda, and I'm not going to deny that I'm guilty of Sfas Yeser. I could have probably said it in fewer words than I said it. But this is what we learned so far. Peirik Vov is the beginning of the discussion of the Nefesh HaBahamis. And you have Zelu Mazeh. So we talked about the Etzem of the Nefesh HaBahamis as the opposite of the Etzem of the Nefesh HaLakis. We talked about the Koichas of the Nefesh HaBahamis as the opposite of the Nefesh HaBahamis, and this is what we're holding. So according to this model, the thing we should talk about today is the Levushim. The garments of the animal soul as their opposite, the garments of the divine soul. So let's start reading from the beginning of the Peirik for the 5th time. Okay? And we'll move until we get to the point that's negea, that touches what we're holding at right now. V'hine, zel yumazeh also elikim. Elikim made zel yumazeh. One opposite the next. Kikameish and nefesh elikis, just like the godly soul. Klula me'eses sfiris kadeshes consists of 10 holy faculties. Umislabeshes b'shleisha levushim kadeshim, and it reveals itself through 3 holy garments. So right there you have all 3 things. You have Nefesh Elokis, Eses Sfiris, and Shleisha Levushim. All 3 steps. Etzem, Koiches, Levushim. Inside, middle, outside. Kach HaNefesh Sidra Achara. The same is true of the soul, the life force that comes from the opposite side. Miklipas Neiga, that lives from a klipa which is called Neiga. Halubeshes Midama Odom, which is the blood of the person. So obviously, on some level or in some way, it has an etzem. But in addition, it has klula me'eser kisrin de misa'abusa. It has 10 crowns of filth. And over here, he doesn't use the word svides. He uses the word ksorim. What's the difference between a svida and a keser? He uses the word eser kisrin, 10 crowns of filth. Shein sheva midas rois, which are the 7 negative attributes. Habois me'arba yesei desroim anal, which come from the 4 negative elements discussed at the end of Perek Aleph. V'seichel hameli, that the 7 emotional attributes have a brain also. But the brain is an excuse giver, not a source, you understand? The brain isn't used to be the source of the emotions. The brain is used as the developer and the justifier of the emotions. Hanechalak, which is divided, l'sholesh, into 3. Shehein l'char chacham bin v'das, which is makeda amid, the source of the emotion. Why is it true that there's always a brain connected to a heart? So the Alter Rebbe says, Ki hamidei te'en l'fiyad ha'chasech. The emotions of a person reflect their intelligence. And when you say that the emotions of a person reflect their intelligence, you mean 2 things, at least 2 things. Number 1, you mean the things that excite you have a lot to do with how intelligent you are. If you're a simple person, you're excited by simple things. If you're a deeper person, it takes more to excite you. But it also means something else. If you're a deeper person, on the one hand, it's harder for a person to get excited. On the other hand, when he gets excited, it's a much realer experience. If a person is a shallower person, it's easier to turn him on. It's much easier to turn him off. The Friedrich ever used to say about American Jews, "Ze varam and ze schnell on, or ze kill the chazeh schnell off." They're excited very quickly, and then you go to a speech, you get a sermon rabbi that was very inspiring, and before they walk out the door, it's shed. So the mind has to do with the heart, both in terms of what kind of things excite you and how deeply the excitement goes. Ki akotten, a young person, cheshek ve'ehev, desires or longs for and loves, dvarim ktanim pchusi erech, things that are small, of little worth. Lefi shesichle kotten v'kotten, because his intelligence is small and narrow. Lahasik dvarim yekarim yesim, things that require more patience, require more time, require more depth, he has no patience for. And therefore, he's excited by lesser things. V'chein, accordingly, similarly, miskayis u'mitzkatze, if he gets angry and is infuriated, midvarim ktanim, from smaller things. V'chein be'espiro, things when it comes to showing off and boasting, right? What are you? Was bist du? Ich bin a plumber. I told you many times as well. I once met a doctor. He was an emergency room doctor. Emergency room doctors are the cutting edge, because there's no such thing as resting on your laurels. To become a doctor, you go to school forever. Once you become a doctor, you do the same procedure so many times. If you're a specialist, you can do it in your sleep. A pediatrician and an emergency room doctor, they see everybody, so they have to know everything. So they're very sharp, they're very smart, and they're very on. They're bored by, you give a doctor a specialty, whether it's whatever it is, they just do the same thing over and over and over again. Yeah. So this guy's an emergency, he's a very smart guy, an emergency room doctor, and I was with him a summer in camp, and we were learning together Gemara. I gave him a sheet in Gemara. So he says to me, I'm not a doctor, I practice medicine. I'm not a doctor, I practice medicine. So I said to him, you didn't go to medical school? So I went to medical school. You didn't pass the exams? I passed the exams. He says, what do you mean you're not a doctor? I said, so he tells me, I don't consider it an honorable profession. But Tafyomi, he says, this is an honorable thing. In other words, he said, I'm not a doctor, not because he wasn't a doctor, because he didn't define himself as a doctor, he defined himself as a yid. His profession is doctorai. So hispairos means to boast, to show off, like you have in Chumash, lomet tisro, mit was weist men zach. What do you say you are? So one person says, I am a chassid. Another person says, I am a plumber. Another person says, I am a lady. A deeper, the bigger person, everybody has more important things and less important things in their lives. But what's important to them is a reflection of how deep they are. So you can do 1,000 things and you're going to show off. The Rebbe once joked by Fabrengen about competition. Wer can speien weiter? There was a whole competition who could spit greater distances. It's a chush. You say it's nothing. You're befeidish something. But think about what kind of person defines himself by hashpai, you understand? So a smaller person is impressed and shows off smaller things. A deeper and a bigger person he understands what's important. This is not a shkaitin. So the hispairos means the boastfulness. Was men weist, what you consider, to say it in nice words, what you beautify yourself by. Was is dein yoifi? Was is dein schönheit? What is your beauty? A deeper person considers beautiful a deeper thing. Usha'ar mides and all the other mides. And this is the koiches of the nefesh habahamis. So this is what we learned the first week, 5 weeks ago, whatever it was, and then we relearned line by line and explained what I said, what happened in the last 3 classes. Like I said, one class we had an etzem hanefesh, we had 2 classes on koiches hanefesh. Now there is a word that I didn't explore, which is the word kisrin. The why it says here kiss. I remember my malabed when I learned Tanya the first time I was a little boy. I'm still a little boy. The difference is now I know I'm a little boy. There's a whole hezbollah in Chassidus why the koiches of the Nefesh Bahamas are called kissin, ksorim. And basically it means, a kesem means something that surrounds. Because in Klippa, you're never any place really. Whatever you're doing, you're only there in the neighborhood. In Eted, there's a cloud, klolos. People who do things in a basic way, they don't break it open into little tiny pieces, because everything that they do only in a general way. You find intellectuals like that. You find people who experience life in less than a deep way. Everything that they do superficially. They don't get into things for all kinds of reasons, psychological and spiritual and religious. But I'm not doing it. Okay, I missed it. I should have given you a share and kiss, and I didn't. It's going to have to wait for Tov Shin Tzadik Gimel when we learn Taidi for the 4th time. Then we'll do it. Remember, it's Halton Cup that I didn't explain Kissim. This is our 3rd time. For those who don't know, in Beis Medrash and Noshav, this is round 3. We learned the whole time here. 3 times. Baruch Hashem. So we're moving on, okay? Last line on page Yud. Having established that a nefesh habahamis, for better or for worse, as an etzem. And having established that the nefesh habahamis, in addition to having an etzem, as koiches and chush, we move on to the next step, which is this. These unclean, these contaminated faculties, and of course they're rooted in an etzem of tumah and klipa. When one thinks using these faculties, turn to page 20, page Yud, or speaks, or acts. So now we're introducing the last dimension of the nefesh. Understand? We spoke about etzem, we spoke about keches and chushim a little bit, and now we're speaking about levushim. Levushim means the tools of interaction, how we relate to the world around ourselves. When you talk to yourself, you think, we hope. When you talk to others like you, you speak. When you talk to things less than you act. Machshava, dibur, maisa. Just like you have thought, speech, and deed in the godly soul and in Torah and mitzvahs, you have thoughts, speech, and deed in the animal soul, and in what the Rebbe calls dvarim tmeim, unclean things. Harei, emphasis. Machshavte shebemeichei, the thought in one's mind. V'dibura shebebiv, the speech which is in one's mouth. V'keach hamasi, and the power of behavior. Shebeyadav, which is in one's hand. Usha'ar everav, and the remaining organs and limbs of the person. Nikrayim, they are called levushe mesavu, garments of, mesavu means dirt, lichloch, schmutz, filth. Le'eser bechines elu atmeya, so these 10 unclean faculties, shemislapshes behem, that the 10 unclean faculties are revealed in the 3 garments, which are called maise, dibur, and machshava. B'sha'as maise, when you're doing an act, or you're speaking words, or machshava, you're thinking thoughts. So when you have a mind and you have a heart and you have senses, and when you choose to focus on your animal's mind, heart, and senses, choose to focus and speak about the mind, the heart, and senses of your animal, you're supposed to act based on the mind, heart, and senses of your animal, you are taking the essence, midas, keches atmeim, and you're being malabish them on the sholish midas, sholish levushim. The thing that must be underscored, even though in the language of the Alter Rebbe, come an abisa the credit, but there's no question that this is the Havana in Chassidus. You must remember, we have two distinct neshamas, which is a very important point, which is going to come up in Mitzvah Hashem, in Tanya Perek Chavches, in Tanya chapter 28. You should know you have two neshamas. You're not one person, you're two people. And when you say you have two neshamas, you don't only mean you have two drives. Every aspect of the nefesh exists twice in a human being, maybe three times, including machshava dibra ma'isa. So let's say you're thinking an Indian and Teda. You're thinking an Indian and Teda, yeah? And in the middle of thinking an Indian and Teda, your man wandered to Chves Nidvos, and then it came back to an Indian and Teda. So obviously your mind went from thinking an Indian and Teda to thinking an Indian and Shtos. But the Tanya will tell you, not only did you change thoughts, you changed thought garments. The difference isn't only what I'm thinking, it's what you're thinking with. Just like you have two nefashes on the level of etzem, just like you have two nefashes on the level of koches and chushim, you have two nefashes on the level of levushim. There's two thoughts, there's two thinkings. And I guess the Kabbalah would be the two sets of bases. There's the thoughts that come from your godly soul, and whenever you think Dvarim Kedoshim, you're thinking with the levushim of your godly soul. There's thoughts of the animal soul, and whenever you think or speak or do animal things, you're using the garments of the animal soul. In other words, Alter Rebbe wants us to know that we're two different nefashis, two different neshamas, not just in a basic way, but in every aspect of the development. There's two distinct life forces that are invested in a person. You're going to see later on in Mitzvah Hashem, in Perek Tes, in chapter 9, Alter Rebbe is going to describe the war. Alter Rebbe is going to describe the war between the Shalkis and the Shabbos. That's what Perek Tes is. Perek Tes is the Milchama. And the nature of this war is that they don't know about the United Nations, and they don't know about ceasefires, and about diplomatic solutions, and compromises. They only know about unconditional surrender. The Shalkis and the Nefesh Bahamas, they don't think in terms of people liking them. They have to win. Nefesh Elokis has to win completely. Nefesh Bahamas Lahavdil has to win completely. And when you say that each respective nefesh should win completely, it means that the entire person should be filled only with what the Nefesh Elokis is. And when you have a thought from the Nefesh Bahamas, it's not just the urges from the behemoth, just the emotions from the behemoth, the actual thought, the oisius hamachshava, that are behemias, the thoughts, is from the Nefesh Bahamas. So the two neshamas are complete system. This is very, very important to understand and to appreciate. Now I want to say something before we continue. Okay? In Tanya, the language that we know is Kedusha and Klipa. And you're going to see it in a moment. The next piece that we're going to be visiting, more or less, is an analysis of the difference between the word Kedusha and Klipa. Between the words Kedusha and Klipa. But if you'll pay attention, if you'll notice, the Rebbe here started using a different word, which is not Kedusha and it's not Klipa. It's Tumah and Tahara. And this comes up a lot in Tanya. If you look at Perek Chavtes, see how the Alter Rebbe uses that word. It's important to appreciate that additional dimension. When you talk about Kedusha and Klipa, you'll get one higoyim, one understanding. When you'll talk about Tumah and Tahara, you'll get a very, very different higoyim. Or in other words, you'll get a much more complex, a much more involved understanding the difference between the hanhagas that a person does. And I'll explain to you why, and I'll explain to you how. I'm in this business a long time. I've been teaching Shurim here almost 30 years, 25 years. It's forever. It's scary. I know that I was once little, and then I got time flies. Okay, then he got big, and now whatever it is. But the bottom line is, I'm not the same Malama that I was 25 years ago. I'm a better Malamed. Mitzad Sheni, I'm not going to tell you. Yeah, the Rebbe says in Perek Gimel, when you get older, you don't become more edel. But I've been doing this for a very, very long time. And I remember teaching you the Tanya way back when. And at that time, when I was teaching down in the beginning, this is how I taught this to you. What we're about to learn now. I'm repeating what I said when we learned this the first time. You know that you have in Torah, Nigla the Torah and Pnimius Torah, the revealed Torah and the secret Torah. There's a very, very big difference between the revealed Torah and the secret Torah. The revealed Torah is halacha. The revealed Torah is dinin. How you're supposed to behave in Elam Hazeh HaMaisa, what's right and what's wrong. HaMaisa sheyasun ve'ela shaleisi asena, things that you must do and things that you're not allowed to do, and things that you can do as you wish. That's what halacha basically is. It teaches you how to live your life. Midayim b'yemi as a yid. And then you have Pnimius HaTorah. The Torah has a neshama. The neshama of the Torah doesn't chas v'sholom change the dinim. Sometimes it changes the minhagim. It doesn't change the dinim. But it's a whole new dimension to the Torah. Can you identify the difference between the two Torahs? To nigla Torah, Pnimius HaTorah. So the idea is, the thought is, the proposal that I'm making is, that we know in a klal, in halacha, that Torah leiba shamayim. Torah is not in heaven, Torah is on earth. Torah leiba shamayim. The Gemara said, by the way, this machlekes is not so pashut. Everybody assumes Torah leiba shamayim is a machlekes. Azay alter Yeshua mechananya. It is not necessarily the halacha like that. V'haraya, we paskin so often from a baskel, and a baskel is bashamayim, not put it. But now is not the time to have this conversation. There's a cloud. Torah was given on earth. With Hishlech Mishamayim Edis Tefedes Yisrael. The Eibishter threw the Torah down from heaven to earth, and there is a nigla de Torah, which you can understand with Seichel and Nushi. Pashat halachas to know what the dinim are, how you're supposed to behave. So there's a rule that says Torah leibashman. Torah is down to earth. Torah is on this earth. And of course, which is why you have so many gzeides and stiyogim and takonis and menhogis from the Chazal, from the Chachomim, from the Rabbonim, to take the Torah which the Eibishter gave us and help us practice it ba'aretz. Torah is given on this earth. But there's another Torah. And the other Torah is Torah Vashamayim. Torah is learned in Gan Eden. And there's huge distinctions between Torah as it's learned ba'aretz and Torah as it's learned Vashamayim. There's a very, very big difference how you understand the Torah, the way the Torah is understood on earth, and how you understand the same Torah as that Torah is understood in heaven. I'm going to give you an extreme example. And the word extreme means exactly how I'm saying it. The Kitzeni is the example. It gets much more involved. I'm just going to give you a simple example for it. There's a famous Ramban. The Ramban is famous because the Rebbe made it famous. He talked about it all the time. It's one of those Rambans that you can't, once you see it, once you can't forget it. In the beginning of Parshas Kedoshim Tiyu V'Kodesh Ani, V'Kedishim Kizim Kedoshim. So the Ramban introduces you to a very unique personality, a very unique character. Agrei Zalam. He calls him Novel B'Reshus HaTorah. Novel B'Reshus HaTorah. You know what novel means? Yeah. Novel means I'm a novel. Filthy, schmutzig, fat. Be ashamed of yourself, yeah? And the guy has a Reshus HaTorah, has a heter for everything. He didn't violate one halacha. Everything you can ask him, how come he did like this? Look, it says in Shulchan Aruch, there's this shita, there's this heter, there's that heter. A person can be 100% frum, and Torah calls him a menuvel. No, so if he's 100% frum, and Torah calls him a menuvel, so it's called, he's a menuvel b'reshus, his permission. Novel b'reshus HaTorah. The Torah gave him a rishya, Torah says, okay. The example which is brought is a person goes to the bathroom with tefillin shal yad. You're allowed to do it. You're allowed to go into the bathroom with tefillin shal yad. Whatever the details are. Yeah. So he did it. Why? He said the Shulchan Aruch you're allowed. Oh, but that's not a nice thing to do. Yeah, it says the Shulchan Aruch you're allowed. You know, not everything that says the Shulchan Aruch you're allowed, you gotta do. Sometimes the Shulchan Aruch is talking about emergency. Sometimes the Shulchan Aruch you're in the middle of a road and you have no place to put your tefillin down. And you're afraid someone's going to steal them. But for a guy to lechatchila say, listen, there's a Shulchan Aruch that if when out in the field and I can't find a place to hide my tefillin, so I take off my shal rosh and I hold it in my hand and I can do what's like a so maybe I can do it in 770 also. The Reshus HaTorah, permission granted, but you're not a nice guy. You're a maneuver, you understand? Torah calls such a person a noble, and you can come up with thousands of examples for this in Nigla the Torah. In other words, Torah, which is Leiba Shamayim, is like a very down to earth. And because it's very down to earth, to use a Amerikaner Sprach, it's very realistic for people on this world to live according to the principles of this Torah. It's full of, it's not so hard, it's not so extreme. Because there's all kinds of, I'll tell you how this plays itself out in the Chassidish world. I'll give you the Sigdan HaChassidi for this idea, yeah? There's an old Chassidic expression which is brought in the Sichos from the Rabbi. And was me meg. If it's okay, then was me meg darfman. What's okay, I'm going to have. Why, it's not osir, it's mutter, it's kosher. Was me tonish, you have to find a heter, that's all. You have to find a heter, you'll find for sure a shita. I once met a rabbi who told me, I'm sure you can find a heter l'chatchila b'di'evet. That's a direct one. L'chatchila b'di'evet. For whatever, I went into his sukkah. The sukkah had so many shyness. So I said to him, I don't understand. You make a sukkah in a shul, you can't make a l'chatchila b'di'evet. So those are his words, b'di'o. I'm sure you can find a heter l'chatchila b'di'evet that makes the sukkah kosher. L'chatchila b'di'evet. L'chatchila b'di'evet means that you're trying to cut corners, and then you have to find a way to make it kosher. So there's the whole dimension of Torah, which is strict halacha, without a neshama. That's called, like I said, the Ramban calls it a novel, which is everything has a head, everything has a source. The eyes are dotted, the T's are crossed. There's no neshama, you understand? It's called Teva Leiba Shamayim. And to use the other form that I use, this is what you say. If your person is going to be do Yiddishkeit of Yitzhazai, right? But here Yerasam Oisi Mitzvahs Anoshim Elamada. Don't be frumed in the Shulchan Aruch. Just keep the Torah as much as you must. When you buy a car, it has to be the best model, and nothing has to be perfect. When it comes to mitzvahs, mehechet teiseh, why do you have to be so frum? Why do you have to be so mahadev so that you can find the b'reshus ha-Torah, with the permission of the Torah, you can be matter many, many things. You're never doing an avela, you're never crossing a line from iseh to heter. But if it's mutter, if it's memed dafman, you have to be normal, you have to be down to earth, you have to be like everybody else. It's a perspective, it's a philosophy, and it's Torah. And then, of course, you have the Ramban's instructions. K'deishim tivgi kodishani. The Eibusha says takes reshus, but not everything that you're allowed to do, you got to do. Not everything. The Torah permits becomes by you hidden mitzvah fakert. A person does fakert. His car is allowed to have a scratch, and his tefillin have to be the best, and his meat has to be the most kosher, and so on and so forth. This is not halacha. This is the neshama of halacha. And it goes towards what you, if you will, Torah b'shamayim. You're looking at the Torah from a different perspective. You're not looking at the Torah as what I have to do and what I'm not allowed to do. It's who I am and what my life is. And when you look at Torah from the point of view of who I am and what my life is, so then what the idea of hidden mitzvah, doing a mitzvah beautifully, and lefnim yishur sadin, beyond the letter of the law, and not looking for a heter and finding reshus from the Torah, because this is what's real, what's important, what matters in my life. This is a higher madrege, it's a higher inyan. And ultimately there is a madrege of what's called Torah b'shamayim, to look at the Torah how the heaven looks at the Shemayim. In other words, if you and I could put ourselves in a mindset where we truly remember and realize that we have an neshama which is a chelik elokam imal mamish, a neshama which is a piece of Hashem imal mamish. And it was yedid lamata, and it was mislavish in a guf, mishcha dechivya, in a nefesh habahamis, in a cheshech kofel chuppah like the world never saw, to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So then your whole mindset is, what do I have to do? In the words of the Tanya in chapter 31, for Yetzias Mitzrayim, to raise my neshama above my guf, to redeem my neshama from the trap of my guf and nefesh habahamis. So your whole mindset is not on how do I enjoy Elam Hazeh, B'Rishus HaTeirah, but how do I connect to the Meibishtin, B'Rishus Elam Hazeh. You understand? Even though the world is saying a different message, my identity is Teirav Aveda. My identity is Avedas Hashem. And that's a higher point of view. And again, the Ramban says, K'doshim tihiyu. Separate yourself. It's taka mutter, you're allowed, but you don't need it. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya Perek Chav Zayin, in chapter 27, end of the Perek, quotes this pasuk: "Kedoshim tihiyu, v'yisam kedosh." Kedoshim tihiyu, you should be holy, and you will be holy. Kedoshim tihiyu, V'hiskadishtem. V'hiskadishtem v'yisam kadeshim. V'hiskadishtem means halify yourself and you'll be holy. So now the Rebbe says v'hiskadishtem means act holy. Act holy. Do holiness. V'yisam kadeshim and you'll become holy. Holy means removed. Removed means removed from this world. You're in a neshama b'guf healthy and successful and blessed and all the yonim gashmi that a person needs to have. So there's v'hiskadishtem, a person has to halify himself. But when you do v'hiskadishtem, often, when you're doing v'hiskadishtem, it's just an act. You really desire this, that, and the other thing. So the Rebbe says in Tanya, Seifei, Li, Yetz, Kadosh, or Movdul, Be'emes, Ma'aseh, Nachara. When you act holy, you achieve holiness. This is not the Reshus HaTorah. This is not doing Torah on a basic level. This is doing Torah on an advanced level, on a higher level. Okay, and again, to use the Hasidic way of saying this, it says, like I said, the Frierdiker Rebbe says it in the Sikh, it's a word from Rabbi saying this Yenu, was men tor nicht, tor men nicht. What you're not allowed, you're not allowed. Or was men meg, darf men nicht. And there are many things that you're allowed, but you don't need it. Was men meg, darf men nicht. You don't have to have it. Because what's the ikir of a person? The ikir of the person is Avedis Hashem. So a life without Kedusha, a life without this V'eskadishta v'yisam Kedoshim, Kedoshim Tig Kodesh Ani, is B'reshus HaTorah. You keep the Torah, but you look for every Rishon, every Heter, every Reshus. A life with Kedusha, your focus is on how I can be closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you're not looking for those excuses. Now, how does it play itself out here? In other words, why am I giving you this speech all of a sudden out of the blue? Because there's a very crisp, there's a very, very crystallized, there's a very explicit way of expressing the difference between these two levels. And what I'm calling it Teira Leiba Shamayim and Teira Bashamayim. The Teira as it's not in heaven, and Teira as it is in heaven. And of course, everybody understands that there's grades in this. There's degrees. In looking for a Teirim, there's degrees. In being Ma'adib and Mitzvahs, there's degrees. But if you articulate it in clinical categories, you have to box it into distinct madreges, this is how it plays itself out. There are three things. There's choiv, and there's iser, and there's reshus. What you must do, what you're not allowed to do, and then reshus. What's reshus? Do whatever you want. Choiv means what you have to do. Iser means what you're not allowed to do. And the reshus means what the Eibishter leaves to your discretion. I mean, I was a little kid. I grew up in the 70s. I was a boy. My bar mitzvah was Tafshel Lamed Ches, the end of Lamed Ches. And in those days, before Tzivis Hashem, there was a rally really once a year for children. For us, Chanukah, there was a Chanukah rally. It was really a rally for the release time children, but we also went to the rally. I can't remember any other rallies on a regular basis. And the Rebbe used to give us dimes. Remember, they would give the children dimes. And as a rule, you got 2 dimes. You got 2 dimes. Now, when I was a kid, I didn't understand the Rebbe Sichas. I mean, even as a bocher, I still have a hard time. The Rebbe Sichas are not easy to listen to, even today. But as a child, they were very difficult. But when the Rebbe talked about dimes I understood. 10 cents I understood. But when the Rebbe talked about giving the children 2 dimes, he would spend so much time. He wouldn't just say, I'm giving you 2 dimes. He would say why he's giving you 2 dimes. And what the 2 dimes were for. And usually there was 1 dime for tzedakah, and there was 1 dime at the end. It was Chanukah, and the stam was for Chanukah. But the way the Rebbe used to talk about that 2nd dime, I remember this from my childhood. This I didn't, as kid, gedenkach, how the Rebbe used to describe how a Yiddish kid is going to get 10 cents, and the 10 cents are going to be with his own, and he can do with these 10 cents anything he wants, and how he's going to use them with his discretion, for good things. So it's your money, and you can do with it as you wish. But when they ever described your money, and you can do it was so holy. Because the Rebbe was teaching us, little children, and I remember this lesson from my childhood, that things that belong to you also have to be used in a responsible way, in a grown-up way. So you have 3 groupings, you understand? There's what Hashem says you have to do, what Hashem says you're not allowed to do, and everything in between. I'm sorry, I don't have the words in my head right now. But as a child, I used to hear this again and again and again, because you went to many rallies, and the Rebbe would say the same thing, and the Rebbe was very patient. The Rebbe was one of the greatest repeaters in the world. As much as the Rebbe said Chedushim, the Rebbe used to repeat himself and repeat himself and repeat himself and repeat himself. He never got bored of repeating himself. I had once an occasion, Rabbi Blooming, who teaches after me, by the way, is a tzaddik nistif, between me, you, and the whole world. His mother passed away. And I went to Menachem. And his father was sitting with all the brothers. It's a beautiful mishpacha. A father Yidin Gizakava, Nazashayim mishpacha. And his father was talking about his shved. That means Rabbi Blooming's mother's father. He was Reb Gedal Yeshor. Reb Gedal Yeshor was a big lamb. He was a Rosh Hashiva in Teredas. He's from the first American Goïnim, an American-born Jew, a real Talmid Chacham Goy. He was a Chassidisher. He had a shaykhis with the Alta Bayanet. And he was charif, sharp. His mind worked razor fast. He was everything he had. He had a Polish cup as a very sharp. Not a Litvish cup, Litvish is very meyush. You sit. And I'm not saying that Chas v'Shalom Rabbi Gedal Yeshor was a shitchi, that he did things superficially, but his brain worked at 1,000 miles a second. And he came to Fabringens. He had once a Yechidus with the Rebbe, a very long Yechidus, in Lamed Daled, in 1974. But he came to Fabringens, and he told his son-in-law, Rabbi Blooming Sr., how many times a person can say the same thing over and over again? And in other words, his brain works super fast, and he knows that the Rebbe's brain works as fast as his or faster, but he sits there. The Rebbe talked very slowly. The Rebbe talked slowly. The Rebbe talked very, very slowly. If you listen to tapes from the 50s, you can hear the Rebbe talk mamish double speed. But it's always Divrei Torah. The Rebbe speaks Torah fast. The minute he goes over from Torah to Musar, the minute he's talking about life, he slows down, and every word is said with so much kavanah. You can mamish hear the Rebbe change. He's saying Torah, but the minute he's speaking to us about life, it's a whole different person. He's taking a hammer with every word and hitting you in the chest. Einmal, zweimal, dreimal. The Rebbe's words were not words; they were fire. They were eses hachakika. They were branded into the heart of the person who heard them. And the Rebbe could say the same thing 20 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times. And every time he said it, he put his neshama into it. Because he's a Rebbe. He's not a Talmid Chacham, a Rosh Hashiva, saying Chedush Torah. He's not also. But he's giving us Torah like the Eibusha gave it to Moshe Rabbeinu, to us at Sinai, Mamish. And the Rebbe would repeat himself. And the Rebbe would talk about children giving their 10 cents to tzedakah, like as if it's such a big deal. He spoke about it dozens of times, scores of times, maybe hundreds of times. And every time he said it, I'm giving you 10 cents. This is yours. Do whatever you want. Right? And for sure you're going to use it like a Yiddish kind. You understand that? Depending on your age, you were either proud or guilty, whatever the emotion was. But you got the message that what's yours is also the Rebbe's. You understand? So here's how you would say it. Getting to the point. In Torah, Leba Shamayim is Azoy. In the Torah on earth, B'Reshus HaTorah. What you have to do, you have to do. Tayag mitzvahs nitnu Yisrael. What you're not allowed to do, you're not allowed to do. It's an Aveda. What you're allowed to do, why not? Why not enjoy? When you understand Torah Leba Shamayim, Torah B'Shamayim, Torah that stood in heaven, you have a whole different perspective. What's a different perspective? I was created to serve my Maker, as the Rebbe would always emphasize, right? I was created for no reason other than the double negative. I was created for no other reason other than my Maker. So is there anything in my life which is not serving Hashem? No. So if there's nothing in my life that's not serving Hashem, what is the meaning of the word Reshus? It's mine to do as I wish. It's mine to choose how to serve Hashem with that. And this is where the words Tum and Tara come in. Kedusha and Klipa present part of the picture. Tum and Tara present another part of the picture. And here's how you have to understand it. Everything that we do involves life. Everything that we do involves life. You breathe, there's neshama in a breath, not just oxygen in a breath. You move your hand, there's a physical motion. through space. It requires energy and all kinds of communication between the brain and the arm. There's a neshama in this motion. There's a neshama in everything. And the neshama has a source. The neshama has a source. But it can only have one of two sources. Either a kedusha source or a klita source. If it comes from a kedusha source, it's tahara. If it doesn't come from a kedusha source, it's tumah. And the point is, let me say it in different words. What's the definition of good and bad? What is the meaning of good and bad? Yeah, what's the good definition? If you hurt another person, you did a bad thing. If you didn't hurt another person, you didn't do a bad thing, right? But from a perspective of Pnimius HaTorah, from a perspective of Torah B'Shamayim, what's the definition of a good thing? It's tahara. What's the definition of a not good thing? It's tumah, even if it doesn't hurt anybody. If it's not in the reshus of kedusha, it's in the reshus of tumah. And in Tanya, if you pay attention, you see how the Alter Rebbe uses the word tumah to help us understand what so many of us call the neutral zone. It's not an aveda, it's not a mitzvah. I can do what I want. The truth is, it's halachically entirely permitted. But is it tahara or is it tumah? That's the language that the Alter Rebbe is going to employ. Okay, this is what we're holding by. Okay, so let's see if we can do some reading now. Okay, and we'll talk about this some more. So how many lines in the top are we? We are 4 lines to the top of page 20. Yud Amid Beis. What are we discussing? We're discussing the nefesh habahamis of a yid, right? We're discussing the nefesh habahamis of a yid, the animal soul of a Jew. And we've already established that the animal soul of a Jew is comprised of 3 dimensions: an etzem, an inner dimension, koiches and chushim, a central dimension, and levushim, an outer dimension. And that whenever we entertain things that are not tahara and not kedusha, they're involved with the nefesh habahamis. The Alter Rebbe says like this: V'heinhei, what comes from the animal soul? And if it comes from the animal soul, that means automatically has a connection to tumah. Kol hamaisim, all actions, asher nasim tachas hashemesh, which happen on this world, underneath the sun. Asher akel hevel v'roi yisroch, they're all empty, and of an evil spirit. U'kameshikos the bezoyar, in the language of the Zohar, b'shalach shein tvira d'ruchul, they come from a broken spirit. V'chein, the same is true of kol hadiburim, all the words that a person says that are not tachas hashemesh, which do not involve the relationship with the Eibishter. And the same is true of v'chol hamachshavos, and all thoughts asher leila havaya hema, that are not for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, u'l'ritzeni, and for His will, v'lavedasi, and for His service. Things that we consider neutral, the Alter Rebbe calls tumah. Now that's very uncomfortable. It's very, very uncomfortable. Why can't you say things that are not called avedes are called tahara? Why does the Alter Rebbe have to speak this way? So again, the answer to the question is, now practically what to do, one of the things about Judaism is, nobody said you have to be a Jew and become a Meshuggah or depressed. You need to have a help, a say l'charav. The Rebbe used to say all the time, don't pull the string too tight, know your limit. If the person's on a lower level, he serves Hashem on a lower level. That's what the Eibishter wants of him. If the person's on a higher level, he serves Hashem on a higher level, so the Eibishter wants from him. But in principle, in ideal terms, right, what the Alter Rebbe is saying is, I want to teach you how Torah is seen in Gan Eden. We're learning Tanya. Tanya is speaking to us. But it's speaking to us, Nishmasa De'eraisa, you understand? Torah is speaking to us how the Torah is learned in Gan Eden. If you can remember when we started Tanya, every time we start Tanya, I always tell you, Alter Rebbe started the Tanya with Gemaras. You know that? Alter Rebbe opens up the Tanya Dafke with Gemaras. Tanya, B'sei, Perek, Gimel, Denid. U'B'Gemara, Perek, Tes, the Brachas. And the Zeh, in Shabbos and in Yevamis, he starts with Gemaras. But before he finishes the first Perek, he's done with the Gemaras, and he moves on to Kisvei Arizal. And he speaks Pnimius HaTorah. He tells us what's a Beinoni, Rasha, and Tzaddik Api Nigler. And then he goes immediately on to Pnimius HaTorah. So we're learning Chassidus. Chassidus is telling us Torah as it is in heaven. Now how I should live that in my practical life is involved. But when you're learning it, you have to learn the Devarim HaKava Yossi. Learn them as Alter Rebbe is saying. Alter Rebbe is saying, when you understand the heavenly point of view, the heavenly point of view is that we're servants of Hashem. And if it's not serving the Eibishter, it's Tumah. And the word Tumah helps put context on the neutral zone. Things that are in the middle. It's not a mitzvah, it's not a veda. What is it? Depends why you do it and how you do it. If you're doing it, l'retzeinei v'lavedasei, it's holy. And if it's not l'retzeinei v'lavedasei, then it's not holy. Let's keep reading. I'm sorry?
Between Tumah and Klipa, why are we...
The difference, what you add in the word Tumah or the word Klipa is the word Chayes. I do something with a koyach of a neshama. Without a neshama, I can't do it. I have a good neshama and a bad neshama. Everything I do, I'm getting life from someplace. So when I'm doing something which is holy, I'm getting life from a good place. If I'm doing something which is neither good nor bad, where am I getting life from? That's where the word Tumah carries over. It explains that I'm involved in something which isn't clean. If I'm involved in something which isn't clean, it's not neutral. It's not nothing. That's how the way I understand it, that's how the word Misavu, Tumah helps the word Klipa. Klipa means bad.
Klipa means bad or...
Klipa means bad. The Chayes of Klipa is Tumah. Let's read it a little bit. Let's read a little bit more, okay? Shezehu Pirish Lashon Setrach. And again, I want to repeat to you, I want to say again what I said before. Remember, there are three things. There's Choiv, and there's Isser, and there's Reshus. Things that I must do, things that I'm not allowed to do, and then there's Reshus. Reshus means do whatever you want. In Niglatate and Halacha, in Torah as it is on earth, what I have to do, I have to do. What I'm not allowed to do, I'm not allowed to do. And what's permitted, do what you want. But when you learn about these same three things, but you come at it from a level of the Shama, from a higher Madrege, where you understand that everything that I'm doing is being in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the middle has a different, you see the middle in a very different light. That's how Alter Rebbe's point is. She says, what is Sidrachim? The other side. Now what does the other side mean? The other, in plain English, the other side means, Al Pi Nigla, there's a right and a wrong and a neutral. There's a benign, there's in between. Al Pi Kabbalah, there's no in between. There's no such thing as in the middle. So he explains how this works. Pirush, Tzad Acha, Shem Tzad HaKadosh. Sitra Acha means the other side. The other side means anything which is not the side of holiness. You know, what would Bush the father say? The quotable quotes from George Bush the father? I think the father, no, the son. The son, the second George Bush, what did he say? What's the quotable quote? Can't have nicht? Huh? Come on.
Say it.
Even I know it.
I hear it all.
If you're not with us, you're against us. That's what they're saying. If you're not with us, you're against us. Now that's not fair. I want to sit on the fence. I want to be Switzerland. I want to be able to benefit both sides. People are killing each other. I'm going to bankroll both sides of the war. I'm going to hide both sides' treasure. If you know, that's what this is about. He says, the other side, which that's he continues. And in order to be the side of holiness, and then the underside of that is pure tahara. It's a place where there's a manifesting and the revealing of the holiness of the Eibush. For those who do not know, the Eibush is everywhere. But in Kedusha, the Eibush is in a state of Ashra and Gili is revealed. And the Rebbe says, Ve'ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu Sheda, a presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is denoted by the word Hashra, which means a deep revelation, without going into the specifics of what Hashra means. Unless there's bittul. The prerequisite for Hashra Sashin is bittul. What does bittul mean? Bittul means that the center of my being isn't me, the center of my being is the Eibush. The center of my being isn't me, the center of my being is the Eibush. When one's existence is bittul, where the center of themselves is not themselves, but the Eibush rests. But then he says something very sweet. In some instances, the bittul is actual, like angels, malachim are actually bottle, and therefore the Shekhinah rests. Or the idea that the bittul is potential, like a yid, lamati. That even if a yid is not exactly the best place, but his neshama has a potential for bittul, shebekeichel is bottle mamish like a Hakadosh Baruch Hu, he has the possibility, the potential to be bottle by Hakadosh Baruch Hu, b'mesiras nafshei al gedushas havai, could be left sitting in Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So the Shekhinah rests there as well. So the rule is in kedusha there's a lukus, and if there's in bittul there's a lukus. No bittul, no lukus. It's automatically the other side. It's automatically the other side. This is the part that the center is eliminated. You take away the middle. If it's bottle to Eibush and the Eibush to rest, that's kedusha. If it's not bottle to Eibush is not resting, it's not kedusha. So what is it? It's bad. So it becomes gray. So the Alter Rebbe uses the word tumah. V'lachein amur razal, which is why it says in the Mishnah, one person sits and learns Torah, Shechina Shriya Chol, the Shechina rests, because you're bottled by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Kol Be'asara, wherever you have 10 Yidden, Shechina Shariya Le'elam, the Shechina rests, and of course the idea of 10 Yidden, Alter Rebbe is going to say later on in Perek Yud Aleph. Listen to this. You have 10 Rishoyim Gemurim here, 10 Rishoyim Gemurim, 10 Roshas with no Jewish guilt. Could you imagine a Jew without Jewish guilt? So Shalos and Yidhud, yeah? 10 Rishoyim Gemurim, no guilt. No guilt. If you have 10 Rishoyim Gemurim in a room, the Shekhinah is present. Alter Rebbe says in the Gezekedesh Chav Gimel, that if a malach walks into a room and there's 10 Yidden and they're speaking Dvorim B'Teilim, doesn't matter, Beheter or Be'Yisim, the malach is overwhelmed from the presence of the Shekhinah which is there. In other words, a Yid has Kedusha even when he's not Kedusha because of his Neshama. They have 10 Yidden, even if they're not doing holy things, the Shekhinah rests. But the vart is for something to be Kedusha, it needs bittul. By a Yid, there's a property called bittul b'koyach. But in the world, for the Eibush to rest, you have to have bittul. And when you have bittul, the Shekhinah rests. But then he says, Avo. On the other hand, kol ma she'enei batel, etzlei yizbarach, when there is no bittul. In other words, there is no sense where the center of me isn't me. The center of me is him. I mean the other way, yeah? If you don't have a sense that the center of me is him, but instead you have a sense that the center of me is me, so then you're a dova nifrit, separate. B'fnei unto yourself. And then, you can't get life from the holiness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from the inner dimension of holiness, and its substance and its essence, as it is by itself. You get it in an indirect way, which is called acharayim from the back. That the life of a lakus descends from step to step. Myriads of steps. To the chain reaction of worlds. According to the laws of cause and effect. And many diminutions, contractions of life, add to the extent the amount of light, the amount of life which reaches something which is not bottle is so diminished, diminished once and diminished twice and diminished 3 times. That's the word I'm looking for right there, golus. That the life can be so diminished, it can be in a state of golus. You know what state of golus means? I live from God and I deny it. That's what golus means. I live from the Eibush and I deny it. That's what golus means. A person's in jail, and the cell is locked, and someone has the key, he doesn't own himself. The Eibush, the spark, gives us life. The Eibush, the spark, gives us life. If the Eibush, the spark, stops giving us life, we stop being. But the spark of the Eibush, which is giving us life, is locked up, and he cannot come out. It's called klipa. It's called golus. And in the practical manifestation of that is called tumah. Teich eisei davar, within that thing, anifit, which is separated. La'chayei, to give it life, or la'kaimeh, to give it existence, me'ayin, from a non-existential state. Li'esh, to an independent state. Shalayach, li'es, ayim, efes, kibetchila, me'kedem, ishniv, it shouldn't become nothing as it was before it was created. And I'm going to stop right here. Now, Rabbi said, I did a lot of reading today. And I also did a lot of talking. I just want to say one thing in conclusion, because I don't want you to walk away from me a Marash Cheda. It's not my favorite pleasure. I'm a Tanya teacher, for better or for worse. This is what I do. And every time, any person who learns Tanya for the first time comes back and says, Rebbe, the Tanya makes me feel like I'm a bad person. This happens to anybody. You open up the Tanya for the first time, especially young people. The Tanya, the Amarasha. So you mean Amarasha? We're all going to show you. And the actual, yeah, that's not a comfortable place to be. So I just want to speak to this. And in Hashem, next Sunday we're going to revisit all of this. I read a whole page today. We're going to revisit all. The only part we're not going to reread is the part that I started this year today about Levush. But this whole thing about Bittel and not Bittel, Kedusha and Klipa, Tumma and Tahara, we're going to re-talk, we're going to rediscuss it. Mitzvah Hashem and Hashem. You see, the Hayam Yang is a one-liner which is so critical and so important. And it so much tells you the neshama, the spirit of the time. There's a one line. Chassidus is a get lecha verstad. Es weiß, wie niedrig mir is, und wie hoch man kennt der Heuvel. That's the whole quote. Chassidus is godly understanding. It shows one how low they are, but how high they can reach. The Tanya is not labeling people. It's challenging people. Of course it's labeling us. But the labels are not fixed. The labels are not, okay, this is what you are. Something like a teif for stickel fleisch. Sell it for teif. Or a kosher stickel fleisch. Put it in the glot pile. We're works in progress. And what makes the Tanya so extraordinary is how engaged in the struggle of life the Tanya is. The Alter Rebbe is not in the business of putting us in classes. The Alter Rebbe is in the business of teaching us what Avodas Hashem means. And when we understand this, I've heard this from Groisa speakers, people who are in the business of selling Chassidus in a marketing way, but it's true. If you want to know what the Tanya is saying, you don't begin to serve Hashem until you include in your avodah your Yetzer Hara and Nefesh Habamis. We're not perfect. We're not pristine. We don't live in this fantasy world. We have a Yetzer Hara. We have to fight with him. The fight with the Yetzer Hara is our enemies, say Nacha. But the fight with Yetzer Hara is who we are. And the fight with the Yetzer Hara defines what we do on a given day. In other words, a bacha will come to me and say, does a skafia mean I shouldn't eat butter on my bread? You understand? Does a skafia mean that I should only eat bread and water? Does a skafia mean that I should sleep on the floor? The answer to all those questions is yes. But no, it's not yes. Why? It depends on the person. It depends on the situation. The Tanya's message isn't you're good or you're bad. The Tanya's message is you're not stuck. There's no person who's in a certain place and this is where he remains. But the way the Alter Rebbe does this, the way the Alter Rebbe provides a person with a sense, with the hashkafa, that I can always be better tomorrow than I am today, is by being brutally honest. There's a quote, I heard this many years ago as a bachet, and then as a younger man, I was working when I was first in yeshiva as a younger man, Rabbi was a Rosh Yeshiva. He was in his 70s and 80s, and I was in my 20s. And in those times, we used to verbring. I can't say we used to verbring together. He used to verbring, and I used to sit and listen. So he repeated the word that I heard with an additional caveat, a lukvetch. There's an old Hasidic expression. Tanya hat a rob genommen dem Nar from the world. Tanya removed the Nar from the world. What's the translation of the word Nar? Most people translate the word Nar as a fool. But it's not true. Nar means a child. There's a big difference in a fool and a child, because fools, they grow up, they become old fools. Children grow up, become adults, right? What's the difference in a child and an adult? When you're born, I remember being born, I remember being little. A child is convinced that the whole world serves them. My father was born for me, my mother, even my older sisters and brothers were born for me. And when they don't cooperate, I don't understand. Then of course at a certain point you figure out that just like I think I'm the center of the universe, so does he and so does she. It's called competition. So a child sees the whole world in a subjective way. What is good? Me, I'm good. What is bad? Anybody's less than me. That's all. What's a fanatic? Anybody's more from than me is a Meshuggah and a fanatic. Why? Because I'm Yeah. When you grow up, you start to realize that you're not the measuring stick. You're not the ruler. There's a ruler. It's written in a sefer. It's called Tanya Kadisha. It says the truth. So what Rabbi Bukin added that I didn't know was that he told us that he heard in Poland that when the Tanya was published the first time, we needed to get the approval of a censor in Vilna, and said the censor. It was the first time it was printed in Slavite. So I don't remember whether the Vilna, there was a big professor, a guy, who was a Malumid, he knew a lot of Torah. He had to learn the Tanya, and he had to approve or disapprove the Sefer. So they came to him and said, why did you approve the Sefer? It was very controversial. The Mustagim were trying to ban it and so on. So the Goy said, Tanya the Rab Gunum dem Nar from Welt. This is what Rabbi Bukin told us. That a Goy, they must have been such a sensitive man. That the Tanya doesn't make you feel bad. Tanya just says emes. And then you fit into that emes, each person in his own level, his own place, and so forth and so on. So when you learn this shtickle, and every time you come across this, it's very depressing to say everything that I don't do that's a mitzvah is automatically bad. And the answer is, we're all works in progress, but this is the emes. This is the emes. Okay, we'll continue with Hashem next week. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to learn the Maimon.